Hey, good morning again, boys and girls. Talking about the Wadanis in Ecuador. You remember last week, Ginny, Steve Saint's wife, had agreed to come down to live with the Wadanis, and she was afraid of some things. Some things were going to be hard. Remember, I mentioned last week, not going to be able to eat cereal anymore because they didn't have milk, and they didn't have a way of making cereal. Now, you could bring it in, I suppose, when supplies were there, but they had no refrigeration, so there's no way of keeping milk cold. It would spoil very quickly, so cereal was kind of out of the way and difficult. A lot of their food, they would smoke. Now, when I say they smoke it, they build a fire and they drape it in sticks over top of the fire and dry it out, kind of like jerky. And that way they could keep it. The American Indians did the same thing. They call it pemmican. But they would take meat and dry it, and then it would be preserved. It wouldn't spoil, and they could keep it that way. Well, they did that a lot, the Wandanis, so that they would have food. They also ate different food. They loved monkey meat. But none of you have ever eaten monkey meat, but they loved monkey meat, and they would love to hunt at nighttime with their blowguns. Remember, I showed you that blowgun here a while back, and how you brought, and they'd use a dart that had poison in it, and that would paralyze the monkey, and then they could capture it, and they would eat it and stuff. They used the machete. They were given machetes, but they had used stone axes before machetes were given to them, and sometimes they would sneak out of the jungle and they would see people on the outside with the machetes, and they would kill them to get the machetes. That was part of their life. But with Steve Saint coming back and with his aunt working with them for 30-some years, there was a lot of changes that happened in terms of the Wadanis. And Steve said, now I brought along this because you know what a blanket is. Wadanis didn't have blankets. They didn't have much in clothes. They wore very little. And at nighttime, it could get cold in the jungle. Up in the mountains, it would be cold, and the cold would come down. They didn't have things to wrap themselves in. When Steve and Ginny came back, they brought blankets with them. And the people marveled at how warm that blanket could make you. Because they would cover themselves with banana leaves or whatever they could find in the jungle. But banana leaves were the big thing. And that's what they used in a lot of their situations. Now, I told you about last week where Ginny came back and somebody brought her a big catfish. Catfish can be big. When I lived in Oklahoma, they had catfish they caught out of the river that would be this long. And they were delicious. I love catfish. Well, this person brought, Ginny had never dealt with a catfish. She didn't know what to do. There was a girl named Marga. And Marga kind of saw Ginny's anxiety, didn't know what to do. And she came over and took the catfish, slung it over her shoulder, went away, cleaned the catfish, filleted it, that means cut off the outside that you could use to cook, and brought it back, wrapped up in banana leaves. Marga was a very special person. Marga bonded with Jenny. She could feel Jenny's anxiety. She could feel Jenny's happiness. They became the best of friends. You may have had a good friend. Maybe in school you have a best friend that you like to spend time with, and you haven't been able to spend time much with them perhaps this summer and in the closing school year, but you love that person. Well, that's kind of how Marga was. She really wasn't related to Ginny, obviously. She was Wadani, and Ginny was from the United States. But she quickly learned to love Ginny. And she would come, and they would spend time together. They didn't speak the same language even, but they learned to laugh together. And Marga was very special. One day, Marga brought a bundle and gave it to Steve. It wasn't wrapped in a blanket. She didn't have blankets. It was wrapped in banana leaves. And Steve thought it was probably more catfish that she had caught and filleted, and he took the bundle and took it in well, I'll call it a house. It was kind of like a house. It had a tarp roof and had floor made out of the trees of the forest there. Remember, when they first came there, only 1/4 of the floor was in. They all had to sleep on that 1/4 of a floor with no walls or anything else, but eventually they got it finished. But anyway, brought it in, And they laid it down. Thought it was catfish or monkey meat or something. Began to make noise. The bundle began to make noise, and he took off the banana leaves, and there was a baby there. Marga's granddaughter. She had brought it to give to the saints as a child. Now, this was her daughter's daughter. You would say, she took her daughter's daughter. Yeah, because in that culture, to give your child to another person was to say, you are my family. You belong to me. Wow, what a statement that was. Now, the laws of Ecuador wouldn't allow them to keep that baby, but they raised it with Marga and her daughter. They named it Annabeth. It was a special, special baby. That was true for others too. Steve's son Jesse, Minkai. Minkai was the man who had been part of killing Steve's father. Minkai had adopted Steve, gave him a new name, and he had become a new person himself. Minkai had. But boy, did he love Jess. Oh, they would tease one another, and they had great times together. One time, Jess, you can see him here, he ran a string. Now, we don't have holes in our ears, but in the Wadanis, they put plugs in their ears. I don't think, you can see the holes there. They stretch them, but one of these pictures will show you where they put a wood plug in there. And they consider that a beauty mark. That's a beautiful thing. Kind of like earrings might be for you in this country. That was their mark of beauty. Anyway, he didn't have the plugs in. He was sleeping on a hammock, because that's their bed, is hammocks. And he's sleeping on a hammock. And Jess snuck by. They love to do jokes on people, to play pranks. And he began to thread string through the holes in Minkai's ears. And Minkai's asleep on the hammock in their house. And then Jess says, "Wake up, Minkai! Wake up, Grandpa! It's time! Monkeys! Night monkeys!" And Minkai jumps up and starts to run. But he's tied down, and he falls backward. And everybody is laughing because of the joke, even Minkai. Now, when it came time for Jess to go back, to have to go to school back in the United States, it broke Minkai's heart. Steve, Jess's father, said, "I never saw a Wadani cry." But when Jess left, tears were streaming down the face of Minkai. He loved Jess so much. He had learned not to live with vengeance, but to live with love. Great, great gift. And I'm going to tell you next week how they got back together. Strange way that when Minkai got to see Jess again. I'll tell you next week. All right? Good. Good job. Now,